40 kilometers an hour with increased fines while they're flashing. Well, this was a little after 9, maybe actually getting close to 10 o'clock in the morning. We went by the flashing sign, accelerating. We went by the sign. I looked over the shoulder of the police officer at his speedometer and watched as the speedometer swept past 65 and was still climbing. I then said, "Isn't the speed limit 40 kilometers here when that sign is, when those lights are flashing?" And he said, "Buddy, I had to exceed the speed limit through here on my way over to assist in your arrest." And I just said, "Just saying." Right after that, or when I said that, prior, I should say, to him telling me, "Buddy, I had to speed through here then," or something along those lines. Prior to him saying that, he had let off the throttle. As soon as I made mention, he let off the throttle and reduced his speed down to the speed limit. But he was definitely accelerating through there. We turned up towards the courthouse. We went through town. The officer asked me a bunch of questions about where I worked in the past or what I did for a living, if I was married. I answered all of these questions truthfully. He seemed like a pretty nice guy, this officer. He did. I don't mean anything by this speeding through the thing. It's just, you know, laws are laws. And if we're to be violently held to them, I think they're supposed to be accountable as well. But, so we get to the station. They brought me in. I was made to remove my boots. I was wearing some old cowboy boots. I was made to remove them. Another officer inside, I do believe it was the original arresting officer, he took off the handcuffs, and then he said to me, he says, he said to me, he asked me, "I don't suppose you believe in antiperspirant either?" And I said, "No, I don't." And I know why he asked me that, because after the stress of all of this, I think anybody would sweat a little bit, perspire a little bit. Not that I was scared or anything, but you know, you're just gonna, your body's gonna do the things it's gonna do. I was then placed in the cell and I sat in the middle. They asked a few questions before putting me in there as to trying to determine who I was, because I had not shown them any ID whatsoever. Yeah, there was none in my wallet. No identification was shown, none was being carried. No birth certificate, no driver's license, nothing like that. All that was in there was my debit card and a few business cards holding some phone numbers of people that I know. They let me sit in there for half an hour or so, and then the door opened up again and more questions were asked. I'm not really sure exactly what those questions were, but questions were asked trying to find out who I was. And I would answer and say things like that I'm not who I was on my birth certificate, that I'm a being, that all of that would be hearsay evidence, that I wasn't there at my birth and I was given that name at my birth. And then he left, I think, and come back again, left me sit for another half an hour or so, and I come back in the room again, and more questions asked, and questions about who they could call if anything happened to me, or, you know, while I was sitting in there, if I suddenly was ill or injured or any kind of an emergency, who could they notify? So I told them that there was a yellow and blue business card in there and that they could call the number on there and talk to that person. He was out. He left me sitting for another while, I don't know, another half hour. Come back in and he told me that I had a phone call from a person named Brad, and did I wish to speak to him. I asked who this Brad, or how this Brad knew that I was there, and he said that he called Brad from one of the phone numbers, got the number from one of the business cards. I need my wallet. Well, Brad's my son, so I accepted the call, and I was brought out of the cell and put into a soundproof telephone booth while two officers stood outside the door. I talked to my son briefly. He said they talked to him. They were asking questions, trying to determine whether I was a sane individual or not. And my son, I think, was capable of convincing them that I was very sane. And they believed it, I think. I don't think that they're questioning my sanity. So then after speaking with Brad, I was returned to my cell, and they came back in again, and I then agreed to give them the name that was on my driver's license and the information of that. He then was able to take that information and find out who I was. He was gone another period of time, not sure how long that period of time was again. And he come back and he said that he was pretty certain that I was who I said I was, and that they could release me if I would agree to appear on the 25th of August and answer on a summons concerning numerous charges: driving without license plates, failure to change my address or to notify and change my address, failure to apply, a number of charges, 5 or 6 of them. They're starting to escape me now. I don't have the papers in front of me. All of them having to do with driving on the roads of Ontario, with being a licensed driver or not, with being within the system. So I agreed that I would show up. They gave me all of those pieces of paper, and I walked out the door. And another officer, after I was in the parking lot, asked me if I could use a ride. And since I was wearing cowboy boots, not the most comfortable for long distance walking, I accepted it. Before accepting it, though, I checked my pockets and I said he forgot to give me my wallet. And he said, "Oh, okay." And he waited, and I ran back in to the station, and they returned my wallet. It was just an oversight. They forgot to give it back to me in all of this. I got back in the police cruiser. He drove me into town, and on the way into town, he was asking me, the police officer was asking me if I knew of a certain individual in town. He stated his name, and I don't remember what that name was. I think it was Brian so-and-so. And he said that this person was of the belief that he could do whatever he wanted. Drive without a license, or drink in public, or be nude in public, or do whatever he wants. Stuff like that, or words to that effect. And then I was wondering why he was referring to this person. I think he was trying to fit me in with him. I don't know this person. I don't know what his beliefs are or whatever, but I just know that I've studied a lot, and I know that these are my rights. He then, just before dropping me off, I asked that he would drop me off at a local coffee shop, and he dropped me off. And before dropping me off, though, he said, "We would just like to nip this driving thing in the bud." I believe that's the way that he said it. We would like to, nip this driving thing, or did he? Or I don't think he said the OPP would like to, but he said we would just like to nip this driving thing in the bud. And then he let me off, and I said goodbye. He said goodbye. He left, and I called my girlfriend, and from here on in, we're getting proceedings ready to go to this answer on these summons.
Just so you know, when Vince uses the word driving, he is not using the legal definition claiming that he was engaging in commerce. It's just evidence of how conditioned we've all been to use words which have very distinctive legal meanings and to use them in a manner outside of those legal meanings. He wasn't driving, he wasn't engaging in commerce, he was traveling. His use of the word driving is merely indicative not of him engaging in commerce, but of him having been deceived for so long that we now refer to any act of traveling as driving.